6.2% figures today. Just before I get back to what I want to ask you about in relation to property, the All Ords is down 96 points, 1.6%, 5,830.5, one Australian dollar buying 70.63 US cents. What's happened there? Why has the market come off the ball this morning?
So the market again is off the back of Wall Street and big falls, particularly in technology stocks. Now, there's real concerns now that we're getting a few rumblings in the stock market that might be almost like the pre-shocks before a decent earthquake. Now, that remains to be seen, but the fact of the matter is there's clearly volatility. People are worried about the sort of earnings numbers coming out of the US. They're worried about rising interest rates in the US. They're worried about the potential of trade wars. But the real truth of it is, Ray, that after you've had such a sustained boom over such a long period of time, as we saw in house prices here in Australia, Melbourne and Sydney, ultimately people are starting to get a little bit tired and don't believe that the markets can keep going up, so they're coming off the board. Okay,
back to what I want to ask you about. Now, let's take where I live in Sydney, northwestern Sydney. If you go out past Windsor Road and you get to Kellyville, you get to Rouse Hill, and then you go to the left-hand side, Schofield, Riverston, you see a sea of buildings, many apartments. Then you get the Bella Vista, which is part of Castle Hill, apartment after apartment, Sekasui House, Morpher building, these apartments to link up with the Northwest Rail link. Many of them sold off the plan to Chinese investors previously. I'm told that what's happening now, they put in a small deposit. They're seeing that they're not going to get a return on their investment, so they're bailing. In other words, they've put down a very small amount of money, based on the purchase price. They can see they're not going to get the sort of money they thought they'd get 2 or 3 years ago or 4 years ago when they bought them off the plan. So in one particular building I looked at recently, 40% had been sold and they're completed now. They're near, they're a week away from being occupied. 40% have been sold. Are there too many apartments being built in parts of northwestern, southwestern Sydney and along the rail links right across Sydney?
I think that's absolutely right. I think you're going to find that given in particular, some buyers are not going to be able to settle. The ones, if I was a first home buyer right now, Ray, what I would be doing is looking at the buildings that are either only just starting to go up or those that have got cranes on them right now. And I'd almost be going into those display suites as a first home buyer. I wouldn't be worrying about and waiting for Bill Shorten and Chris Bowen to get their policy in place. I'd actually be doing it pretty much right now, and I'd be scouting those types of properties because you know that those developers will be desperate to sell these apartments, especially if they've got off-the-plan buyers who are walking away from their commitments because those developers are also beholden to banks, and so as a result, the banks will be sweating on them to sell these apartments off as quickly as they possibly can. And when that takes place, guess what? Prices start to fall and prices start to become very affordable for first home buyers. So the piece of advice is just keep an eye out because it's almost like a game of pass the parcel. The last one with the parcel, it goes off in their face. And so in this particular case, if you're a first home buyer really looking out for bargains or even an investor, these prices in Sydney, Melbourne, parts of Brisbane with apartments are likely to continue to fall and are likely to continue to fall for maybe the next 18 months or so. But what you really do know is that those developers that are really struggling to get some of these off-the-plan buyers across the line are going to need to compromise on price and probably fairly significantly. If you're there in the right place at the right time with the right bank on side but prepared to back you, then in that case, I would suggest that is the chance for some first home buyers who really, in many of these markets, have not had a chance for up to 10 years.